Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 150. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Nation. Dave, end of the week here, not a ton of news to talk about. Do have one roster transaction to discuss, but could be a quiet weekend, although Pittsburgh keeping us on our toes throughout this offseason. Dave, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Happy Friday to you. Happy Friday to the listeners. I woke up this morning to Motley Crue, Home Sweet Home, featuring Dolly Parton. A version I didn't think that we needed. Evidently, they thought we needed it.
How was the song? Where is it proven correct? Not your favorite version?
Somehow, I think my old man's getting the final laugh here on me. Rest in peace. Yeah, not a huge fan of that. And yeah, I was not expecting to kind of wake up to that this morning, but everything else is going well overall. As you mentioned, we head into the weekend. Still waiting on the contract specifics for the DeShon Elliott extension. I don't think the Steelers have even officially announced that yet, and it definitely nothing since the initial contract terms have been released. The things that we went over the other day, and still got a pretty decent idea of maybe how that thing's laid out. Once again, I don't think that his 2025 cap number is going to increase all that much, maybe close to $1 million, but we'll be watching for that throughout the weekend. Probably not going to get the actual numbers, though, until probably early next week. And once again, the Steelers haven't officially announced that, but DeShon Elliott, bit on, it's happened. We just are waiting for the specifics on it overall. But the Steelers did make a transaction. I'm glad they got a transaction out of the way before I started my 90 and 30 series, which I think is going to kick off today or tomorrow here. But tell the folks about the transaction yesterday.
Sure. Pittsburgh announcing they had released veteran running back Jonathan Ward. He appeared in 4 games for Pittsburgh last season. Earlier in the year, whenever those injuries struck to Jalen Warren, Cordell Patterson, they had Aaron Shamklin. Then Ward got his chance, had 4 carries, primarily played on special teams, had originally joined the team out of rookie minicamp in 2024. Veteran tryout exception, was signed, made the team. Recently talked about that story about impressing and earning that spot, and now he'll be looking for work elsewhere. So not sure the reason for the move now. It is a curious time of year to make that move. Pittsburgh does have pretty decent running back depth overall, but Ward was a versatile guy. They could play on special teams, could catch, pass protect, had some good speed. So I'm not entirely sure where this move came from, but it is the move announced by the team.
Yeah, they misspelled Cordell Patterson, didn't they?
He survives again.
Yeah, survives again. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming there. A lot of people are speculating or open up a roster spot for somebody. We'll talk about kind of what the Twitter machine seems to be up in arms about concerning that here in a bit. But as far as the actual release goes on that, not saving any cap money there because he was outside of the rule of 51. I think this just might be a sign that we'll see if they add another running back or what have you as far as the offseason roster goes. But certainly did not have that on my bingo card for ending up this week. But we'll see where it goes from here. But he is now going to be a free agent.
Let me pull up Pittsburgh's depth chart at running back and read it off to you, courtesy of our friends over at Our Lads. Jalen Warren, Caleb Johnson, Kenneth Gainwell, Cordell Patterson, Evan Hull, Trey Sermon, and Max Hurlman. Besides the top 3 of Warren, Johnson, and Gainwell, are there any running backs behind that intrigue you entering training camp?
I think Trey Sermon's an interesting guy to watch transpire here throughout the rest of the summer. Obviously has had a cup of coffee or 4 or 5. He's obviously played some snaps in the NFL to date, and kind of a guy I think that the Steelers had a little bit of interest in several years ago when he came out of Ohio State. So I think that's probably, in my eyes, the most intriguing guy, and we'll obviously continue to watch what happens with Cordell Patterson the rest of the summer here, and it will be interesting to see. Didn't they have a little bit of position, somewhat flexibility in a guy in Max Hurlman during the summer months there?
Yeah, he played everything in college, and he had that sit-down interview with Ross Tucker and talked about playing, I think, receiver, running back, corner. I mean, he's played everything, and so he's a hyper athlete. I'm not entirely sure how they even designated him listed as a running back. I saw him go through running back drills during some of the OTAs and minicamp workouts, so that's a name to keep an eye on. Yeah, Sermon, a veteran, more established. He was signed out of rookie minicamp the way that Jonathan Ward was a year ago. Sermon's a guy that's had success against Pittsburgh, had that his career showing in the NFL was against Pittsburgh in 2023 when Sermon and some of those backup Colts running backs ran all over Pittsburgh's entire defense in that game. And so he signs now. He's got size, and that's always attractive to Pittsburgh. I look at Evan Hull too. That's a guy that I like coming out of college. Could he be a Jonathan Ward type? A little bit bigger running back in terms of stature, but he's a third down profile of a running back that can block, that can catch, tested well coming out of, I think it was Northwestern. So, I think there's some interesting talent, buried on the depth chart, guys that'll have a tough time making the 53, but potential good practice squad material. If one injury happens, somebody gets called up, you never know.
Yeah, and as you get into the training camp, and you never know what kind of injuries might sideline. Now, look, those guys at the bottom of the depth chart there, they certainly can't afford to miss any days, right? So, we've seen in the past, once training camp gets underway, guys with those kind of nicks and bruises and bumps and whatnot, that end up costing them 3 or 4 days, could end up costing them a roster spot as well too. But it is a little bit, as we just named there, Sermon and Hull and Herman are at least intriguing guys to monitor the rest of the summer here.
And I'll mention something, I'll repeat something I should say. I mentioned, I think on the last show, that we took Najee Harris's great health for granted. The odds of every Steelers running back, even the starter this year, Jalen Warren, playing every single game at full health and capacity, unlikely to happen. And so all it takes is one injury. And there's not really a workhorse back on this roster right now. Warren might be the closest approximation to that, but is Caleb Johnson ready to handle the full workload? Not out of the gate. Now, when he's going to work on still some improvement needed in pass protection as a receiver, Kenneth Gainwell's not going to be an every down kind of a guy. So Pittsburgh is truly in committee approach, where if somebody goes down, they're going to need somebody else to come up and absorb some level of snaps.
Yeah, exactly. So, how many total running backs is that now on the roster?
I just closed out of the page. I want to say 7. The top 3, Patterson, Hull, Hurlman, and Sermon.
Okay.
Quickly on DeShon Elliott, with that not being announced, is that just a matter of he has to come in the building, take a physical, everyone's kind of away for the offseason? Is that's why there's kind of this lag between the reporting and the official announcement not being made?
Yeah, I wish I knew the exact answer to that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's out of town, but I don't know on that. Maybe during this podcast or by the end of the day they'll announce it. Then it'll carry on over into the weekend there. But it has not hit, at least on the NFLPA side, that I've seen yet. I mean, he has announced it obviously on Instagram and all like that. So one would think that it's probably signed at this point.
Do players have to come in and take a physical even on extensions like this? Is that part of the procedure?
Yeah, I don't know about that either. I suppose that's a possibility, and he might just be out of town.
Right.
I don't know. So I was hoping by now that we'd have more of the contract details on it, but obviously we don't. So hopefully at least by next Friday when we're recording this show, we'll have those.
I'm not disputing I'm not sounding any alarms, to be clear for any listener. It's going to happen. I just was spitballing some ideas of why it's been a couple of days since the reporting that happened. I think Monday night that got announced, and it hasn't been announced by the team officially. So that could be the lag there. He's a Dallas, Texas native. He could be off in, back home and needing to come into Pittsburgh at some point if there was a physical involved to officially ink this extension.
Right.
All right, Dave, let's talk about some AFC North news that was sort of semi-related to Pittsburgh. Jaire Alexander, the talented but often injured cornerback, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, released earlier this offseason. He's in the AFC North, unfortunately not with the Pittsburgh Steelers, signing a one-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens. It's the Ravens secondary on paper looking really strong, Dave. One-year deal worth up to $6 million, $2 million of that included by incentives, playing time incentives with some health concerns that Alexander has had. He's only played in 7 games in each of the past 2 years, but when healthy, one of the top cornerbacks in football. I know that some Steelers fans wanted Alexander to come to Pittsburgh. Ultimately, he chooses Baltimore primarily because of his ties to Lamar Jackson, those two teammates, in fact, roommates at Louisville in college. And so those guys reunite and Baltimore gets stronger.
Yeah, I guess looking back at this in the rearview mirror now, how surprised should we be? You got a guy that's missed quite a few games over the last several seasons here, a guy that's talented when he is on the field. You look at, as you mentioned, the relationship with Lamar Jackson, who had came out several days ago and basically asked uh, Eric, what's his last name?
DaCosta.
DaCosta, to go out and sign him. And then lo and behold, about 24 hours later, this was probably kind of already some talks going on there. Anyway, I'd hate to think that Lamar Jackson's calling the shots over there. But I think when, I know Steeler fans as a whole are upset that, A, the Steelers didn't land him. We don't know what kind of interest in any they may have had in him. They're also upset that he landed in Baltimore. No, a lot of people were saying, well, that's not a huge loss. The guy couldn't stay healthy. I get that. I think the terms of the contract kind of dictate where his value was around the league at this point. All I will add on to this is $4 million base salary for a guy with $2 million in incentives, with the upside that if he is healthy, you can't do anything but take your hat off. As Hines Ward would say, take your hat off and hand it to the Ravens here. Because, okay, $4 million base. Let's say he doesn't, he misses some games, and assuming this guy isn't a cancer in the locker room, this is really a very, very low risk signing for the Ravens. And what if he does get out on the field and plays well and stays healthy for 75% of the games, and it helps recoup his value, if you will? Then he flies off in free agency next offseason for a nice contract, and the Ravens get the compensatory value that comes along with that. But if he misses games and is the same old Jaire Alexander, then you have all but $4 million tied up in him. And it really sounds like, according to Alexander, he had some other opportunities out there and could have, sounds like could have made more guaranteed money. But for long story short, if the Steelers were going to sign a guy like Jaire Alexander, it probably would have had to been a one-year deal for a guaranteed $6 million, because the Steelers just, for whatever reason, for a long time now, for non-quarterbacks, they just don't like doing incentives. And that's obviously $2 million of the $6 million that he can earn in 2025 with the Ravens are tied. So I think mostly playtime incentives there. So at a minimum, I think the Steelers would have had to pay Jaire Alexander 1 year, $6 million fully guaranteed, because they don't like using incentives. And once again, we don't know what level of interest, if any, they had in Jaire Alexander. But not surprising overall to me that he landed in Baltimore and that he's not a Pittsburgh Steeler. And then now we'll just have to watch. Can he stay healthy? And you can never have too many good cornerbacks, right?
Right. And the point that you and I made when we discussed Alexander right after his release a couple weeks ago was not that we were against the idea of Pittsburgh pursuing or signing Jaire Alexander. It was why does and why would Jaire Alexander want to come to Pittsburgh, where you have two established outside corners in Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr., and he has agency to dictate where he wants to go on a 1-year deal that, as you said, would likely end up with incentives, which it did, which Pittsburgh does not do for non-quarterbacks. Now, Baltimore is pretty stacked at cornerback too, with Nate Wiggins, former first-round pick, of course, Marlon Humphrey, add Alexander to the mix. But the difference between Baltimore and Pittsburgh is Humphrey plays a lot more in the slot than Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. ever have. In fact, Humphrey played more snaps in the slot last year than he did on the outside in totality. And so he's a guy that in base packages is an outside corner, but he plays a ton inside in nickel. And so I imagine that's going to continue where Alexander will be an outside corner and Humphrey will play and kick inside in those sub package situations. Maybe it's Alexander Humphrey as your starting outside corners in base, and then in nickel, Wiggins comes on the field to play outside. Humphrey slides to the slot. So it's a really impressive secondary they're building in Baltimore with those three corners. There's some good depth. You have Kyle Hamilton at safety. I understand that transaction take place, but Alexander wanted to go to Baltimore for the chance to win. Baltimore's in a better position right now. And of course, those ties to Lamar Jackson also played a pretty big factor into that. So it's part of free agency. You can talk about the guys that you would love to see in a Steelers uniform, and Alexander would be one of those guys, but it takes two to tango. He wanted to dance with Baltimore.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, couldn't they have done a multi-year deal with him? Well, yeah, yeah, they could have, but Jaire Alexander's wanting to rebuild his value here, and potentially get one nice big bite of the apple one last time in 2026. So it was wherever he was going to land overall, more than likely that was going to be a 1-year deal, and probably one that included incentives on top of it there. So if the Steelers did call on him, I imagine the conversations were real short, because once again, I think to even be in the neighborhood ballpark of having a chance to sign him, it would have taken at least $6 million fully guaranteed, and mostly stemming from the fact that the Steelers just don't like to do in incentives with non-quarterbacks. Is this something the Steelers, we talk about the undrafted free agents and guaranteed money and all like that. Is this, and I think I've pointed out this in the past as well too, as far as precedents that I'd like to see the Steelers start moving away from, is should playtime incentives or performance incentives for non-quarterbacks be something that the Steelers start exploring more of moving forward?
I think you look at everything, reevaluate all the way we've done things, that kind of framework of we do things because this is how we've always done these. Those should all be examined to see if it really makes sense to do so or not. I wish I had a slightly better understanding of why Pittsburgh has chosen not to do incentives. We can take some guesses as to why, maybe a little more salary cap clarity, maybe some of the potential tension incentives can cause. Oh, they weren't playing me late in the season. They weren't throwing me the ball late in the season because I have this big incentive, and they didn't want me to hit it and rob me of it. Those things have happened. Players have talked about that. I think sometimes they're more theorized than they are in reality, but those things could pop up as well. So it's a little hard for me to critique this one because I don't have as clear an understanding of why Pittsburgh does not do incentives, and I can at least take some guesses and understand why they don't structure contracts that way.
Yeah, don't want other players pointing at him saying he's got incentives. Why can't I get incentives? Yeah, just, once you break the seal on it, though, you can break the seal on it moving forward. But, and once again, we have seen this team do it with quarterbacks, most recently, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers. Before that, Mitch Trubisky. It's just something they don't, and when they traded for Vance McDonald several years ago, he had per game roster bonuses even in his deal. And I think the first opportunity they had to restructure that contract, they got those worked out of there as well too. It's just something that if we ever have Omar Khan or even Kevin Colbert on the show at some point, those are the type of questions that I would go at him with. Is why does this team just loathe incentives on non-quarterbacks?
Right. But either way, Jaire Alexander in Baltimore this year, and Pittsburgh will have to deal with that when they face the Ravens twice this season. So from one corner to another, with Alexander off the table, a lot of rumors, a lot of internet buzz about Jalen Ramsey of the Miami Dolphins. Does not seem like Ramsey's going to play another snap in Miami. A trade seems inevitable. The question is, to where? And a lot of Steeler fans wondering if that's going to be Pittsburgh. Now, we haven't written much about it, haven't talked much about it, but it's a slow news day today, so we'll entertain the idea. And some are connecting dots. Ramsey posting, or somebody posting at least photos of Ramsey working out at UCLA, which is where DK Metcalf has worked out at. There is no direct evidence they've worked out together, but we know Ramsey is at least out there. Also, some saying that he has recently followed a slew of Steelers, I should say, on Instagram, including Broderick Jones, Cam Hayward, DK Metcalf, etc. We are not able to verify that. I have not been able to find any proof of that being a recent thing. He is certainly following them. You can go check that. We checked that ourselves. But in terms of when that occurred, we do not know. He follows a ton of football players, obviously. So it's not like he's following just Pittsburgh Steelers, but that is, I guess, worth noting, with some people speculating, could Ramsey be a Steeler? Now, that's a whole lot more complicated situation with his salary and trade compensation, all that kind of stuff. But what are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, immediately you look at the cost factor here, and specifically, his contract set up kind of weird, where it's got some option bonuses in there, and I'll read you what Over the Cap has on this, because they have a long article dating back to, I think, April 15th of this offseason, when it looked like Dolphins would be looking to trade Jalen Ramsey at some point. They have on here, for a team acquiring Ramsey, they would be on the hook for a virtually guaranteed $21 million for 2025, which would be the seventh highest salary in the NFL for a corner. The team would have the option to take on all of the cap charge this year, or to maintain the option that exists in the contract with the Dolphins and take on $5.826 million cap charge for this season. Ramsey has a $5 million injury guarantee on his $21 million salary in 2026, which would become fully guaranteed, along with a $2 million roster bonus on the third day of the 2026 league year. He has a non-guaranteed 21.7 salary for 2027, and a $24 million salary for 2028. They go on to write, the other option for Miami would have to renounce their option on Ramsey in August to delay the payment of that $18.98 million signing bonus, blah, blah, blah. So on the surface, if you want to look at this from a plausibility probability charge, just on the virtually guaranteed $21 million for 2025, and the potential that a team would have to have the option to take on all the cap charge this year, or to maintain the option that exists on the contract, and thus take a $5.826 million cap charge for this season. I don't, if the Dolphins, if the Steelers were to acquire Jalen Ramsey, you would have to think that they're going to make the or require the Dolphins to eat some of that. It's just hard to fathom the Steelers taking on the whole virtually guaranteed around $21 million for 2025. And even if they were to take this other path of the delayed option, I guess, and it being it's just hard to imagine that they would put off any other guaranteed money past this season.
Can you explain that second part? Okay, so they take the $5 million and change. What happens to the rest of the money that gets paid out for next year's salary cap?
Yeah, it would end up in paying them an option bonus. The rest in an option bonus. So
when would that option bonus, next March? Do we know details on?
I don't have details on that. It's still kind of murky, but you'd still, if the contract came as is, and they they took the route of taking the $5.826 million cap charge on a $21 million, then logic tells you that the other 15 point whatever million would be, guaranteed and then have to hit next year.
Right.
So that's the way my interpretation is on this. And the long and short of it is, it's hard to imagine the Steelers taking on a fully guaranteed 21 million this year, and then it's also hard to imagine that them going the other route and saying, okay, we'll take on nearly or a little over 5.8 million this year, and then put off the other 15 point whatever million until next year for a guy that more than likely would be a 1-year rental, right? Overall. So the only way that I think, and that this might be league wide anyway for any team kind of thinking about acquiring him, would be that Miami would have to eat a pretty decent chunk of this 21 million.
Right, and that's the issue with the Rams right now. There were some easy links, and the assumption, myself included, earlier this offseason that he'll go back to Los Angeles and reunite with Sean McVay, and the Rams have openly talked about that possibility, but very recently, I think this week, Sean McVay came out and said that door's still open, but it's looking less likely because there are obstacles to getting that deal done. And he didn't say what those obstacles were, but you can take a pretty strong guess that it's heavily revolving around the contract of Jalen Ramsey, which is a massive contract that is difficult to unload. And so, yeah, it's a little Kirk Cousins like in the sense of there's going to have to be this dance of a give and take, and then how does that impact trade compensation? How much money does Miami eat? And then, how much does Pittsburgh want to give up draft pick wise? What would you even give for Jalen Ramsey? A fourth? I mean, you've got an older corner. You're taking on a ton of money. The Dolphins don't have much leverage here. They need to dump this guy. It seems untenable for him to play. Is it a fourth? Is it something else?
Man, and the more that you get them to eat, the more they're going to think that they're going to want in
Right.
compensation, right?
Right.
That's where all this gets real messy, especially with their with it still kind of being a little bit vague about the this option bonus, and they go on over the cap goes on to write the other option Miami would be to have is to renounce their option on Ramsey in August to delay the payment of that $18.98 million bonus. It would increase his cap charge by the $18.98 million, which the Dolphins do not have the room to absorb right now, but would allow them to trade him away during the season, without having paid almost his entire salary for the year, perhaps getting the new team to take on a portion of his salary. So it's super messy here. And look, you just look at what they have on the books for Darius Slay right now, which is what, $10 million at this point. Can you even fathom the Steelers taking on Jalen Ramsey and paying him more in cash on their side of the ledger than a Darius Slay?
Been trying to think this through how it would look and work because it is more difficult. You have Porter, you have Slay. Those are two starting outside corners. Ramsey can at least play in the slot a whole lot more than a Jaire Alexander, more than Slay, more than Porter. So I do struggle trying to figure out how the pieces fit. I guess in some sense you could say it's a good problem to have three very talented corners and to make everyone work together, and at the very least in sub packages, you can put Ramsey probably in the slot and have Slay and Porter still on the outside. What would your base package situation? Could there be a rotation with some corners? I guess everything. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying I'm 100%
I know
against
where
it.
you're
You talked
going.
about the need for cash spending, and Ramsey certainly would fulfill that. But it just seems so messy on every single level. I have a hard time wrapping my head around the whole concept of it, Dave.
And then Ramsey, the player and the locker room guy too. Not a choir boy, and kind of a mercenary, I guess if you will, and has been for a while. If you look outside of the money alone and the compensation, the whole thing just seems so messy and something that the Steelers wouldn't deal with. But I mean, if they did, the only plausibility and probability to all of this to me, starts with Miami having to eat a lot of salary here.
Right. It's hard to think Pittsburgh will take on that whole contract as is. There's also, it looks like, a lot of per game roster bonuses in his contract. I mean, I imagine that can get worked out without too
Right.
much trouble if a deal were to take place. But you had mentioned that about Fancy McDonald, Pittsburgh not liking to have those. That would also be something that would have to get figured out as well as part of any potential deal.
Right. Look, I understand the excitement about this team potentially maybe adding a guy like Ramsey. Who is that guy out there, Slick Rick or Ricky Slick?
Yeah.
Uh, I know he's adding fuel to the fire, and as you stated at the top of this segment here, we can't we we do our best to follow Instagram stuff like the following of other players and all, but we can't individually say that in the last, I don't know, 24, 48 hours that he's started following all these Steeler players and all. But it would have been, I'll tell you this, it would have been a lot easier to go out there and sign a guy like Jaire Alexander
Hmm.
for 1 year, $6 million, and been a lot less messy and been more of a, okay, I can see why they went this route than it would have been getting into all of the messiness that we just kind of covered here with the Jalen Ramsey stuff here. So because of the cash, and look, once again, you're not going to take this guy on a $21 million cap charge. You're just not, you know. Could you? Yeah, you could go restructure some guys and all, but is this it just the whole thing seems very unsteeler like top to bottom when it comes to potential compensation, when it comes to the cash. And look, I've even said that since the Aaron Rodgers thing got done and all, this is still a team. And even since the DeShon Elliott contract got done, yeah, there's this team is going to spend more cash this offseason. You got the Watt deal. We talked about Boswell. There's the whole, is there another potential wide receiver playmaker that they might add at some point? But at some point, you got to draw the line because of some of these things that you think are going to happen with the Watt deal, with the Chris Boswell extra money, with maybe another wide receiver being added. There's a point where you got to draw the line in the sand, especially when you look deeper into the messiness and the compensation and the cash and the cap and all that goes along with Ramsey. I would put it at, I don't know, 98% chance that this does not happen with
Mm.
Jalen Ramsey. I think you've got to allow some, at least, percentage of chance, but man, I think I'm being lenient at putting it even at 98% or 2% chance that it does happen with him.
I might have the door open slightly more than you. I really don't know what percent chance I would say it won't happen. But like I said, it just is super, super complicated. And as you said, is this just a 1 year play? I mean, he signed under contract through 2028, but there's a bunch of void years on that contract after all that funny money and just kind of, accounting purposes. But is he going to play past 2025? And if so, or if not, then what is your trade compensation for a guy that would be a 1 year rental, as you talked about?
Yeah, now if you're another team out there and you can factor him into the longer viewpoint and absorb kind of this option bonus, and in other words, taking on that 5 point whatever million salary cap this year, and almost, you're almost locked into a point that you're thinking about, okay, well, at least maybe he'll be here 2026 as well too. It's a lot less messy, I think, for other teams not named the Steelers, because it it's hard to imagine him being more than a 1 year rental in Pittsburgh. But they do have a guy like Darius Slay on the roster for 1 year right now, and he's a 1 year rental. You would really have to, if you're the Steelers, be all in on him past this year, I think, if you were to go out and do this.
Now, let me play devil's advocate and talk about some reasons why it could happen. I'm pretty sure Mike Tomlin has a lot of respect for Jalen Ramsey. He loves those pedigree guys, those blue chip prospects coming out of college. And Ramsey's one of the best DB prospects to come out in quite some time. Way back in 2016, there were battles in Jacksonville. Remember AB and Jalen Ramsey going at it back in their prime and heyday. So I'm sure that's not lost on Mike Tomlin. Pittsburgh has done the unexpected this year. No one thought back in February Aaron Rodgers would be this team's quarterback. The DK Metcalf trade and the contract certainly was unprecedented. We talked about that. And while, yes, Pittsburgh needs to also add some offensive weapons, this is a team that is still led by its defense, built by its defense. If there's a chance to get stronger there, the Steelers may not turn down that opportunity to add and try to really lean on this defense. And there is still certainly a strong component of win now for Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick, and you go out there and sign Aaron Rodgers to obviously win now. You're not winning for tomorrow when you make that move for Aaron Rodgers. So just to kind of look at it from the other perspective, there are some reasons to believe why it could happen.
Well, look at it first and foremost. Would this technically on paper be a better team with Jalen Ramsey?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I don't think anybody would. Many people would dispute that. And look, if he was a choir boy and just what they did with Pickens and trying to clean up a little bit culture wise, and but once again, when you start peeling back the layers, 5 years ago, Alex, I would have posted the Sesame Street gif of those aliens that constantly go nope, 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 nope.
Sure. This was a Kevin Colbert led team, different situation, I think.
Yeah. That's why I think at least you've got to open it up to some percentage of, especially where they sit from a cash and a cap, because from a cash standpoint, even me saying 25 million more in cash, I'm not capping them there, but I think that's at least the minimum. But I would also dare go on to say that I can't foresee them going more than 35 million more in cash either.
Why not? Any reason why 35?
Just because of the percentages based on how much I perceive them a max of going over this year's cap in cash spending just does not make a lot of sense overall. I kind of have them at a minimum of spending 25 million more in cash, but with open up the possibility of it being 35 million more. I just cannot see them spending more than 35 million more in cash for on this season. So because of that, once again, you can make the cash work because of delaying some of that cash until 2026, and but the whole thing just becomes, if you look at this just from, okay, if you're going to look at it from a probability from a cash and a cap standpoint, could they make it work? Yes, the answer is yes. But from what I think they're going to do in those two areas, and then once again, they're not going to take on a $21 million cap hit on this guy. They're just not. But because of there being an option bonus and being ways you can make the cap hit, under 6 and then defer into cash and the cap until next year, it opens up some level of probability, plausibility. But the best I can get myself to is maybe a 2% chance of this happening. And then once again, what's the compensation?
Right.
Are you wanting to go down the road of this kind of guy, how he might be in the locker room, and would they indeed be buying into at least having him on 2026? And
right,
how much cash can you get the Dolphins to eat? It just seems like there's going to be better trade options out there for him other than Pittsburgh.
Because if you defer that option to next year and he's only playing for this year, then you got a bunch of dead money next year for a guy not on your team. And could you make it work? Yeah, you could probably absorb that, but do you really want to? Not really. And then, comp pick wise, you might not get much. Remember, there is that rule for guys 30 years old or non-quarterbacks.
True.
You can only get a 5th round comp pick as your max for that. So even if you say, well, we'll get a 4th, we'll get a comp pick for him next year. 2 years from now, it may not may not happen. So the other I mentioned it
Well, he
already,
wouldn't
but
be a free agent anyway because he'd
oh yeah, you'd be
technically
cutting
be
him.
under
Yeah,
contract. So
right,
uh, yeah, you can throw that out the window then as well too
right,
because
right.
the void years don't start until 2029 with him.
Right. True. But if he structured it somehow where he was a free, yeah, it just messy. And then getting him playing time. Slay's never been a bench guy, rotational guy. Ramsey hasn't been. Do you want Porter to start losing snaps? A lot of this comes back to could you make it work? Yes, but it feels very messy to try to make it work contractually, and then also from a role playing time standpoint for your top three cornerbacks.
And look, are you going to have Jalen Ramsey roll out there play any special teams? No. Are you going to have Darius Slay roll out there and play any special teams? No. I mean, you could get around that obviously. And once again, it rolls back to would this be a better team with Jalen Ramsey than without? At its core, I think everybody would answer yes on that. But all it would have been a lot less messier if this team was looking for a cornerback with some upside in 2025 to have went out there and given Jaire Alexander 1 year fully guaranteed
Sure.
at 6 or 6.5 or even $7 million, and they didn't go that route, and it just I we would not be doing our job if we did not, at least especially on a Friday and on June 20th and with all the rumblings on Twitter and all like that, if we did not address this. And so I felt it was important for us to at least kind of look at all aspects of it. But once again, it's pulling teeth for me to get it at a 2% chance. But if I put it at 0% chance and then something did happen, everybody come back and say, "You said this was never going to happen." So I do feel like I'm being generous though in the fact of saying there's a 2% chance of this happening. But you put it a little higher than that.
Yeah, I don't want to put a number on it because I really don't have a number. What a 10% chance? What's the difference between that and a 15 or a 2%? I'm not expecting it, but you never know. Pittsburgh has surprised us this year, and I could see Tomlin saying there's a chance to get a really talented cornerback that I've liked for a long time and try to really go all in on this year. You're facing an AFC that has a lot of good receivers in Cincinnati with Chase and Higgins, and Yosevos made some plays, and Baltimore Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and DeAndre Hopkins. So you are facing, pretty competitive receiver rooms this year. If you can match that with three really good cornerbacks, I get the idea of it. Now, the one thing we haven't discussed super in depth is what kind of player is Jalen Ramsey right now. Didn't make the Pro Bowl for the first time in several years last year, but still had good numbers. He played all 17 games. He had 2 picks, 6 tackles for a loss is impressive, a sack, 4 quarterback hits. So there's a blitz component to him that could be useful in this defense, especially from that slot cornerback position, 11 pass breakups. So there still was productivity. I hadn't watched him in depth. I think there was kind of some feeling his play wasn't quite as strong as it was in that Rams, Jaguars heyday, but still obviously a talented cornerback.
I think still has a propensity now to take plays off. I think, he obviously not the cornerback that he once was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about Ramsey the person. It feels like there's maybe some difficulty. I don't know if that's what that's really related to. So I don't think that would necessarily scare Pittsburgh off because of the whole Mike Tomlin can fix anybody and will make it work with a strong culture, especially defensively with a stronger culture in that defensive side of the locker room. I know Pickens and Johnson were issues offensively and they were jettisoned in part because of that, but the culture and the veteran leadership wasn't as strong offensively. And so I think it was harder to make those guys, tenable and fit in the locker room. Defensively, it might be easier.
Right. It's just messy top to bottom, but there you go. We addressed it.
Yep, there you go. All right, Dave, a palate cleanser here. Let's talk about running backs again. Mentioned Kenneth Gainwell briefly earlier in the show. Wrote an article today. This is admittedly part of the offseason boredom, just trying to drum up some ideas, some things to think about. Is this likely to occur, what I'm about to talk about? Probably not, but we know Gainwell, a talented receiver, was brought in partially for his route running ability for a running back, his ability out of the backfield, what he proved against Pittsburgh last year, 3 receptions, 40 yards. They were all first downs, I believe all on third down, no less. And so there's certainly a pass catching element to Gainwell that is interesting. I was thinking, could he be a rare running back, especially in Pittsburgh, to have more receptions than rushes? Could he almost be that quasi wide receiver? And the question was, how many Steelers running backs since the merger have had more receptions than rushes? Turns out there were 3 in a single season. Veron Haynes, the last in 2006. There's a blast from the past, Dave. He had 18 receptions and 15 rushes back in '06. Rodney Carter in '89, 38 receptions, only 11 rushes. Was really truly a running back, but in essence more of a receiver. And then Rich Ernberg in '85, 33 receptions and 17 rushes. I know the odds of Gainwell doing this are probably low, obviously, but what do you think? What are the odds he does end up having more catches than carries?
What year was a strike year?
82?
Oh, okay. I'm having a hard time placing Rodney Carter. I would have never came up with that one.
Yeah, late 80s. He was a running back. He wore number 24, but he had more receptions, I think, in his career than he had carries in Pittsburgh.
Probably not shock Rich Ehrenberg on that list. I would have what Mawalde Moore. What did
When
he
I
come close to it?
He did. I note that in the article. When I first had the idea, I thought Moore had to be one of those guys. I have it somewhere in here. Where was it? Welde Moore in 2010. He had 33, or I think I have this backward. 33 rushes and 26 receptions, I believe. So he just missed it.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess you're posing the question: Could it happen with Gainwell? Yeah, I think it could.
What does that look like in terms of numbers, though? Because he can't have that many carries. I mean, the running back room
Right.
has to stay healthy. If somebody gets hurt and he's pressed into a larger rushing role, then obviously the odds of this happening are basically 0. So I proposed the idea where he has something like 40
Something like
rushes and
Haynes.
43.
I don't
Well,
know if he even have that many. I mean, I think you could be maybe looking more along the lines of those Veron Haynes numbers in 2006.
you think he'll only be involved that little? That feels like not a lot of offensive production, not a lot of snaps if that does come to pass.
Well, I mean, if your top 2 guys are healthy, and obviously we're going to have to wait and see what happens with Cordell Patterson too, right?
Hmm.
Uh, in that mix and all. But I don't know. In my head, looking at these past guys and then looking ahead, if all these guys stay healthy, with Warren and Caleb Johnson and all, I can envision an 18-15, to be quite honest with you.
So something where he's just simply not playing a whole lot, just because the other guys are dominating the snap count.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I guess I just envision if he gets into the third down role a little bit more than anticipated. What if Jalen Warren assumes more of that early down role? They back off some of the third down duties. Aaron Rodgers gets the ball out quick, likes his check down. Gainwell's a guy that can be split out, can play a lot in space, may not get a ton of true backfield type of work. They want to get creative with him. Again, it's offseason fodder. It's unlikely to occur, but an interesting thought. And I'm curious to see, what Gainwell's involvement in the offense is in totality. And then as a receiver versus a runner, that'll be interesting. He's not really come close in his career in Philadelphia. The closest he came was as a rookie when he had 33 receptions and 68 carries. So not even halfway there, but we'll see. Just wanted to note that and a trip down memory lane of Ron Haynes and Rodney Carter and the like.
How rare is it across the league in the last 5 years for running backs to have, and I'm not just talking about 4 receptions, 1 rush.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
talking about some sort of a baseline, I guess, or minimum.
Right. My minimum for the post was for a Steelers running back to have at least 10 carries and 10 receptions was the minimum. So it wasn't just, this guy caught 1 pass and didn't have a carry, and so he counts. I didn't do it that way. That's a good question league wide. I would have to look it up. I imagine it's rare, but it probably has happened a decent amount of the time, but I couldn't tell you offhand.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I guess being point blank asked that question. That was interesting. What caused you to go down that hole?
Being really bored and trying to find something to write about, as all articles seem to get created this time of year.
All right. I guess when you posed the question, my first thought was, yeah, he could potentially do this. But I would envision it more along the lines of maybe those Veron Haynes 2006 numbers.
I guess that's a good thing if that comes true because it
Sure.
means that everyone stayed healthy, like you said, and then everyone probably played well. So, yeah, I mean, it just felt like Haynes was more of just the afterthought that would occasionally come in for Bettis and Staley. And I don't know, they didn't throw the ball as much back then. So it feels like Gainwell is going to at least be a little more involved than that. But I do understand your point.
I think he's definitely a guy that occasionally you're going to want to get the football in his hands out in space, right?
Right. Yeah, that's certainly a big draw and reason why you sign him. It wasn't for his between the tackles prowess. I mean, it was somebody that can be out there in space and win some one-on-one battles on linebackers and put those guys in difficult matchups and be a little more quick than fast. So yeah, I think absolutely.
All right, good work by you for the offseason boredom. You went down the rest of the rabbit hole too on something that came up in our live stream on the YouTube channel on Monday, where we looked at Steelers opening possessions of Week 1 games, and the last time that they had a opening drive offensive touchdown in a Week 1 game. And I think during that live stream, we came to the conclusion that that was 2008 and Willie Parker. And I think you went down that rabbit hole a little bit further, didn't you?
Yeah, just a little bit. You laid the good groundwork for me, Dave. So Pittsburgh, yeah, no opening drive touchdowns in a week 1 game since 2008. Crazy streak. The question inevitably was, is that the longest active streak in the NFL? And to my surprise, it is not. In fact, funny enough, the Houston Texans, who Pittsburgh scored that last touchdown against, have the NFL's longest streak. The Texans have not scored a week 1 opening drive touchdown since 2006, but Pittsburgh has the second longest active streak, one that hopefully gets broken against the Jets in week 1.
I'm telling you exactly how it's going to happen. 75 yards, 12 plays. Aaron Rodgers caps it off. What did I say? A 12 or a 15-yard touchdown pass to Pat Fryermuth. That's what I'm hoping for, and I'm hoping for it for several reasons because it's already pre-written itself for Alex Kozora's stats of the weird.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So just a weird stat there, but it's sad in a lot of ways. And Pittsburgh needing to be a faster starting team. We know the first quarter numbers were bad last year. We know in all of last year, Pittsburgh did not have a first drive touchdown. So all that production has to change. It'd be a great way to kick off the new year with an opening drive touchdown against New York.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at your question about running backs who have caught more receptions and rushes. I went back to 2020. There are a decent amount, actually. I'm just kind of rolling through. It looks like James White in 2020 with the Patriots. Who else? There were some that were identical. Well, no, wait, that not identical there, but Rex Burkhead with the Texans in 2022. A lot of former Patriots, a lot of those types of guys making the list here. So there were a couple of examples, but generally the volume is pretty high where they're catching, 40 passes and they're running 20 something times. So that's again kind of my initial thought on what a Gainwell season would look like. But again, the odds are probably pretty low for this to actually come to pass.
Right, especially if everybody stays healthy.
Right. Last thing to talk about, Dave, and I don't want to make too much out of this. I know that the combination of the name and the lack of storylines this year is going to make it more of a story than it might otherwise be. But Shedeur Sanders over there in Cleveland, Dave, having some off-the-field stuff come up already. Was pulled over by Ohio police recently for driving 101 miles per hour in a 60-mile-per-hour zone. Apparently, this is the second time he's been cited for speeding. It sounds like he missed at least one court appearance. I mean, is he going to be suspended over this? No, obviously not. Life goes on. But with all the talk about Sanders, some of the concerns about him, this is not a storyline I'm sure the Browns wanted, 2 months into his NFL career.
Yeah, and look, how many NFL players get speeding tickets, period, during an off season? I don't know how many of them get them for going 100 overall there. But look, you got all the stuff stemming from this was a guy that a lot of people had as a first round guy that ends up waiting most of the draft, a good portion of the draft to finally get drafted, and you get even a Dylan Gabriel get drafted by the team that ended up taking Dylan Sanders. All the questions about the character and the kind of the what's kind of not the what's the word I'm looking for?
I'm not sure. What are you trying to get
I'm
at?
just trying to say kind of a take for granted, like he's owed it,
The
because
entitled.
yeah, the entitlement
Okay.
was the word that I was looking for there. And then he kind of gets humbled here going in the fifth round there, and then it's certainly not the thing that you want to be known for, especially with him and the storyline coming out of the draft and all like that. With him, it's the optics are not great, and I'm glad it's Cleveland and not Pittsburgh.
Right, right. And so it's just about making good decisions. I always think about the Herm Edwards. Nothing good happens after midnight. And this incident, this latest one, took place around 12:30 a.m. Tuesday morning, according to reports and police records. So, again, is this going to be a storyline come September? No, people will move on. It's not the end of the world. It's not some felony he committed or anything like that. But certainly going to just add more fuel to the fire for those that were detractors against Sanders and had that concern about, him as a person in the locker room and why he fell to the fifth round.
Hey, I've been ticketed for going over 100, so I can't point fingers at him. But also, I was not a high profile person either.
Right, exactly. The players, the pros of being an NFL player is the celebrity status, of course, the pay, just the opportunity you get that most don't. But that comes with a cost, and it comes with higher scrutiny. And so I know people like to make the comparison. Well, how would you like it if somebody came into your job and started yelling at you and saying how bad you sucked? I mean, I get that, but listen, you get paid millions and millions of dollars for this opportunity. You have a higher level of scrutiny, and so it's apples and oranges comparing a 9 to 5 to the life of a professional athlete. There's a different standard, and maybe it's not the most fair thing in the world, but it is the cost of doing business, and everyone's aware of that. And the Sanders family certainly is aware of it for everything, with Dion and the Sanders name. So this is not a surprise. There's extra scrutiny when it comes to any NFL player doing this. Jordan Addison with the Vikings, we wrote about it. His rookie, he was going 140. He had some real issues there that hopefully he's rectified. But this is going to be a story anytime, and anytime something comes up, it's going to get talked about.
You see, what happened was the accelerator got stuck.
Officer, yeah.
All right. Once again, better Cleveland than Pittsburgh.
Exactly. All right, Dave, that's all I got. Not seeing any late breaking news here. So if you have anything to add, feel free. If not, we can get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All
Who you got in
right.
Game 7, by the way? Thunder or Pacers?
Thunder. I'm going Thunder.
I'm going Pacers.
All right. I thought the Thunder would put it away last night, but they obviously didn't. But I'll take the Thunder there. All right, Caleb back in here. Happy Friday to the best in the biz. So with the Elliott extension, do you think that eliminates the talk of trading Minkah? And why do you think he has struggled the past 2 or 3 years? Also, does DK have a broader route tree than George Pickens did or has? It seems to me that they have very similar skill sets. Do you think that's why they went after him specifically, or was it based off of best available talent on the market? The Elliott extension, I mean, all the trade talk about Minka has mostly been fan generated, I think, and hot take artist generated there. So I, the one is not a one does not is not a one does not equal the other there. So I think all that trade about Mink, the people talking about trading Minka was just fan sided.
Yeah, that was never going to happen this year. And the Elliott deal is really no reflection of Minka's future. It's just an opportunity to sign a talented, good player like Elliott to a long-term deal that's still not for a lot of money overall when you look at the safety market by and large. So it's a good deal. It's a good chance to get him locked up instead of having some uncertainty about will he be back in 2026 going into next offseason. Why has Minka struggled? It's the last 2 years because he was good before then. 2020 2023 was injury. He was hurt half the year. He had nagging knee injuries. He also was having to play down in the box way more than he should have been, about 20% of the time. That's usually 3% of the time. It's what it was about last year. So that was the issue then. Last year, I don't want to say he struggled. Like, he didn't have a bad year. He just didn't have the splash plays that we're accustomed to. It felt like maybe he was a little more hesitant to be aggressive on the football. But I don't want to say it was a bad year because it wasn't a bad year.
You wrote a little bit about middle of the field stuff as well too, didn't you?
Did I?
Uh,
Did I?
I think you did. Wrote about some. Didn't you write about targets or something related to
I may
him?
have, or I don't know if Clayton did. I'm trying to think back on that. Maybe that was more of a Clayton thing that we kind of collaborated on. I mean, yeah, if you look at some of the numbers when he was targeted, I mean, he did struggle more, I think, when targeted last year. I'm trying to think back. I think his numbers were certainly not as impressive. The lack of interceptions isn't going to help, say, his quarterback rating against. There were some times on Mark Andrews where, it's a tough matchup, but he got beat a couple times there. So it's just, let me back up. I don't think the positioning is the issue. I know that gets cited so much, even by the local media. Like, he played his true free safety spot last year, and Pittsburgh got him back there because they signed Elliott to be that every down strong safety. So Minka could be the free safety. Could you argue they were unable to rotate him in some of those sub packages, third down looks, maybe especially early in the season when you had a younger group, you had Beanie Bishop in there, you didn't have somebody that could come in and rotate and spin up the safety, maybe. But overall, like, I wasn't unhappy with his usage and how he aligned last year. I think overall that was pretty much in line with what he was used in his prior to 2023 and 2019 and 20 and 2021, 2022, whenever he was that free safety, that ball hawk, all pro. So I'm saying a lot of words here. I'll let you jump in, Dave. But I wasn't unhappy with Minka's season, but I do recognize you want to get him back to making those splash Minka-like plays.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there is the actual plays, the plays that the turnover worthy type plays or the huge pass breakups. Remember, he's one too that come up has made some nice plays in some third and fourth down stops right before the line of game, right? So
Great tackler. That's
yeah,
always been.
pretty good. Yeah, great tackler overall in there. And the biggest thing here, obviously, the last couple seasons is where have the splash plays been?
Right, right. And so you do want Minka to get back to that. I mean, Pittsburgh tied the NFL lead with 33 takeaways last year, despite Minka only having one interception and your number one corner, Joey Porter Jr., only having one interception. So you can get those guys to, Minka to get back to form, and Porter getting a couple more picks. I know it's not been historically in his wheelhouse, but if he can get 3-4 interceptions, Minka gets 4 or 5 interceptions, and the rest of the defense does its typical thing, you could have 35 plus takeaways next year.
Right, right. The second part of this question, does DK Metcalf have a broader route tree than George Pickens did or has? While George Pickens has made some strides, I think, since coming into the NFL, as far as a complete route runner goes, I think Metcalf is a more refined guy. With that said, though, I don't think DK Metcalf would be regarded as one of the top 10 route runners in the NFL. But I think DK does have a more broader route tree than George Pickens.
I think maybe marginally. I think they're fairly similar overall. Pickens' route tree improved from where it was his rookie year, but I think they're pretty similar in terms of how they win and their style and their overall route tree. I think the way they win downfield's a little bit differently. I thought Metcalf's a little more stack the corner and get a step on him. Pickens is a little more contested catch, make the play with a body all over you type of thing there. And the other question was about, did they add Metcalf to replace Pickens' skill set? That was another add-on to that question, right?
Yeah, it seems to me that they have similar skill sets. He says, do you think that's why they went after him specifically, or was it based off of best available talent on the market? I think it probably a little bit of both. It wasn't like you could go out there and push the button on just anybody to go get, especially when you're looking for someone to spend some cash on as well, too. And they do have, even though their builds are obviously, DK's, thicker, type guy. At their core, they do have similar skill sets, right?
Yeah, fundamental. Oh, good. I'm really not able to speak well
You sound
today.
like me.
Fundamental. I know. Foundational level. They are similar, but Metcalf is more physical, more intense. I think a little more freakier than George Pickens, but similar on that baseline view. But I think what Pittsburgh wanted was that AJ Brown type of weapon in the Arthur Smith offense. That big physical guy that can block, that can run, that can do damage post catch. They were in on guys like Chris Godwin, on DK Metcalf. Those are the big physical type of receivers. So it was a little bit about replacing Pickens' skill set, but really kind of finding that true number one receiver in an ideal Arthur Smith offense.
And plus, there's only so many that you're going to be able to go out and go get anyway. All right.
Right. Right. And he was the best of the best.
All right. Joseph Thomas in here. 2 questions I'd like to hear you discuss based on the Wednesday podcast. Tomlin losing the locker room. You two talked about the only way Tomlin could exit, get fired would be if he lost the locker room. Can you define that? I think that was more of what you were talking about, Alex. He says, I feel like he has kind of lost the locker room in recent years. Some examples would include players speaking out about Canada, problematic wide receivers, mid-season team meetings, disagreements on who should be starting. Just would like to hear you talk a little bit more about that. So better define what you mean by kind of losing the locker room, if you will. What does that look like? And that is a kind of a vague kind of
Hmm.
thing by team, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I will admit it is intangible. It's really hard to put a definition on it. It is one of those classic, you know it when you see it
Right.
kind of things. To me, it's often reflected in the heart the team shows on the field and the fight they show on the field. Teams to begin quitting and players you can kind of tell are packing it in, and either that's on a game by game basis or throughout the course of a season. That's a little bit more where I think it kind of gets revealed. Like these players aren't playing hard for Mike Tomlin because they just don't buy into his message and they don't just aren't trying to fight for him anymore. That's kind of my viewpoint of it. So that's where I think it gets shown the most is in a collective team-wide lack of effort or intensity. I know things looked really bad last year. What I really call that the team mailing in last year. I really wouldn't say they were mailing in last year. It was just more football issues that were hurting this team. So that's kind of what I think about when I think about what losing a locker room looks like.
All right. Second part of this question, mid to late round draft success. It's fair to talk about the lack of success in round 1 of the draft in recent years. I wonder if we aren't talking enough about the success in the mid to late rounds, though, especially in recent years, he says. Porter, Benton, Frazier, McCormick, Peyton Wilson, Trice, Bishop, etc. A bunch of studs for where we landed them in the draft, in my opinion. I'm sure it's hard to quantify, but I wonder how that success stacks up to other teams in the league. Yeah, that's another interesting thing when you get beyond first rounders here. I will say this. I think look, you're constantly going to have third, fourth, fifth rounders, at least you hope, that come around and play their role. And then maybe you re-sign one of those guys to an extension, and then you cycle through other guys in other classes. That's why you have draft classes like that every year and all, because not everybody's going to be an NFL starter or even a 600 play guy for you for all 4 years. And look, the jury obviously is still out on guys like Porter, Benton, Frazier, some of the names he listed here, but also you're only a couple of years into those guys as well. I don't know if he's trying to say we aren't talking. He's saying, are we not talking enough about the success to mid to late round guys as of late? And yeah, I mean, you would hope that and look, Porter and Benton are coming up on huge years, huge third year seasons for those guys. Frazier obviously had a very good rookie season. McCormick look like he's got some promise there. Wilson, Trice obviously been injured. We'll see what happens with Beanie Bishop. But what has kind of happened? Let's go back to some of those draft classes before, those years and what's left of those.
Yeah, not much. And I think you can give Omar Khan credit for seemingly doing a better job in some of these mid to late rounds. I don't consider the second rounders to be the mid round guys. You still expect second round picks to hit more often than not in
Right.
some capacity. And a lot of guys have their stories still to be written. McCormick, Trice, names mentioned. We still have a lot to learn about those players. So I won't put them emphatically in the win camp, even if they're trending that way, McCormick especially. But yeah, I don't. I think we'll talk about it more, especially after this year when those guys really get to come into their own and we really get to find out what some of these second year guys or third year guys are capable of. So I think we give them credit and we'll continue to watch. Can I give you just going back to that last question about losing the locker room? Can I give you one, I think, good example of what that looks like to me
Okay.
and a pretty relevant example? I think we're both regrettably Pittsburgh Pirates fans. And during the Derek Shelton era this year, like that was a team that just felt like they were throwing in the towel, like they were going through the motions. They weren't a good team and they just felt like they were just done. Like Shelton had been tuned out, no one cared. And the team's play reflected that when they fired him and Don Kelly became the manager, the tone of the team changed. There is more fight, there is more aggression, there is a little more attention to detail. And even though the team is still not great, they're about a 500 team under Don Kelly. There is a little different intensity to them. So that's kind of one thing you can point to recently about what it looks like when in this case, a clubhouse has basically tuned out their manager.
I don't want to turn this into Pirates Depot, but I have watched more Pirates games this season, unfortunately, than I have in recent years. And I did kind of have this thought last night. If Don Kelly was managing any other team, he'd probably be winning a lot more, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think he's done a nice job. Even if he was managing Pittsburgh at the start of this year, what would that record be? They still wouldn't be a great team or even a good team, but could they be hovering around 500? Maybe.
Yeah. They've got the damn pitching right now for the most part. Uh, except last night, poor Paul Skeens, man. That guy
I know.
pitches his ass off and then no decision. And yeah,
I know.
and then, you saw in the fifth inning, I don't know if you saw how much of that second game that you saw, but, he was rolling right along. Then it felt like the umpire was really squeezing him in the fifth inning and he got you could
Was
see.
that a dead ball on that interference? I was watching the game, it was on mute. I couldn't hear the conversation. What
Well,
did they rule there?
at first I thought Paul Skeen just didn't know how many outs there were.
Me too. Me too.
And
But
then they started showing the replays and all. I thought, "Oh, I understand what he was doing there." The only thing I can take away is it ended up just being a dead ball situation.
is that what they rule? I couldn't.
I
There
had
was
the
no audio. I
sound
couldn't
down
hear the
as well too
commentary.
because
Okay.
something was coming up. I forget what was happening at the time that I was searching something on the internet and all. I don't I know enough about it where I'm dangerous and probably shouldn't talk about it, but, my takeaway is it was a dead ball.
Right, because there was interference on Gonzalez, and I guess I'm assuming here, I'm sure somebody can correct us on that interference. That play becomes dead at that point. So even though Gonzalez threw to first and got the runner out, it was dead at that point, and so that's why there were runners on the corners. And then they had the 2-run single or double, whatever it was, and those were the 2 runs, and then the home run in the eighth inning or whatever that tied the game. So yeah, sucks for Skeens in a lot of ways.
Yeah, at first, though, I thought, "Damn, they got Paul Skeen." The umpires got Paul Skeen so shook that he forgot how many outs there were.
Yeah. But I
But
mean, you get my point about like you
right.
felt the difference between
Sure.
Shelton to Kelly. Like the intensity and the focus of the team did shift positively.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
If this team had more bats and could hit the damn baseball, they probably have 15 more wins right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah. But to bring it back to Pittsburgh, that's to me what losing the locker room, losing your
Okay.
team looks like. That's the play that gets shown whenever that occurs.
Alright, where was I on this? Okay, we talked about just real quick, I had pulled up, the previous draft classes. I mean, you go back to 2020, Chase Claypool, obviously that didn't work out. Had a second round pick invested in him. Alex Highsmith did work out. Anthony McFarland never really did anything. Kevin Dotson, was that a developmental issue? A good player, just the Steelers didn't use him properly. And then Antoine Brooks Jr., nothing there. Carlos Davis, nothing there. The year 2021, Najee Harris, you obviously got 4 seasons out of him, 4,000 yard seasons. Pat Fryermuth definitely has lived up, I think, to at least the second round grade. Kendrick Green, oh, what a mess there. Dan Moore, at least you got. Uh,
I mean, it was a good pick. It was
yeah,
a multi-year starting left tackle that was Competent.
And then the rest of the class there, Buddy Johnson, Isaiah Loudermilk. Loudermilk's just been a guy. Out of the rest of that draft class, it was Buddy Johnson, Isaiah Loudermilk, Quincy Roche, Trey Norwood, and Presley Harvin III. The only thing really to talk about there is Isaiah Loudermilk, at least being a depth guy there.
Who they had to trade up for, too, which made that pick look a little bit worse because of the cost to acquire him. So that was another part of the Colbert era. There were a lot of misses at the top, for sure, but there were also a lack of hits in the later rounds that could kind of bounce back from a draft that might have had some issues at the top. You didn't get that in the later Colbert era. You had some real just whiffs. And yeah, a lot of those day three guys aren't going to make it. You know that going in, but you really didn't have anybody you could really hang your hat on that also impacted the depth of this team or the lack thereof.
Let's see if we got one more here. I just discovered the podcast. This from Ian Buscott, looks like. Writes in, just discovered the podcast a few weeks ago, and I'm already an avid listener. All right, Ian, welcome. Thanks for all the hard work across the platform. On Wednesday, you talked about Tom Pelissero referring to Tomlin as year to year, with him being a respected reporter. Do you think there's any chance he might have learned something in confidence and maybe let it slip? I think Alex sort of kind of
I referenced that idea.
About that, entertained that. He says, I know you guys discussed the possibility of Tomlin continuing to coach for the Steelers. Dave predicated his prediction on the idea that the Steelers would win a playoff game. What does Tomlin's job security look like if he doesn't win a playoff game? If the team misses the playoffs, if the team goes 5-12, or is he basically a made man who could murder a baby penguin live on TV without any job repercussions? You guys did a better, same, worse for the O&D and special teams. What about coaching? Thanks for your time. Have a great weekend. So I guess he's saying, what does Tomlin's job security look like if he doesn't win a playoff game, if the team misses the playoffs, if the team goes 5-12?
And if he murders a baby penguin.
And if he murders a baby penguin. Let's hope we're not talking about the last scenario there.
I think his job security is very high. When you look at this contract, is Art Rooney going to fire him and pay how many tens of millions he'll still be owed, that $50 million extension he signed just last year? I don't really see it happening unless it is so catastrophic. It is so on its face untenable where that locker room truly is lost. That's maybe the only scenario, and that's very unlikely, I think, to occur this year. So I don't really see a scenario that's even semi-realistic in which Tomlin is not the head coach in 2026, assuming he wants to coach, unless it's maybe the only way he's not, is if he does decide for whatever reason to step down. I don't anticipate that, but that's the only thing I can think of. On Pelissero, yeah, I had mentioned that. Is Pelissero saying something he can't outright say from a source reporter hat, and so he kind of says it in his speculatory, I'm just speaking as Tom Pelissero hat? Maybe. I can't prove it either way, obviously, but it was certainly notable to hear a national reporter talk about Tomlin in those terms.
Yeah, especially not named Jay Glazer, I guess. As I would have tried to parse out word for word more had Glazer said those kind of the same things there. But you don't know how much these guys do actually know, especially with some of these insiders. Overall, and Tomlin is fairly guarded overall, but I suppose that's plausible, I guess.
My overall thought
that he learned something in confidence and maybe let it slip.
Right. I'm sure there's so much these guys know they can't report, either because they can't verify or it's off the record or they're protecting a source, whatever the case is. But my overall thought on the Pelissero thing, if I had to give an overall takeaway, and it was messy to try to parse out what he was saying, I think he had made that comment in passing about Tomlin year to year. Eisen jumped on it, as he should, and Pelissero then had to try to talk his way out of it. I don't think he really meant anything by it whenever he mentioned it, because it wasn't like Pelissero led with this information. He just mentioned it in casually when talking about Watt and Hendrickson and Pittsburgh trying to win now and all that kind of stuff. I think that's just, he kind of put it in there just as conversation fodder, and then Eisen, obviously caught him by surprise, and then they had to spend 5 minutes discussing that. So I think he just said it and then kind of realized I didn't mean it that way, but now we're talking about it and I got to try to say something. So I think that's what happened there.
All right, I would agree. He's got a good point here. We did better, same, worse for OD and special teams. What about the coaching staff?
I mean, the coaching staff really didn't change that much.
Right.
The big turnover last year where 7 new coaches were brought in. Of course, offensive coordinator Arthur Smith and some of the guys that were brought in there. I mean, you had 2 changes primarily.
McCarley.
You had a couple. Yeah, you McCurley, you had Jaire Alexander brought back. And then you did have minor ones. Mike Sullivan departed. You brought in Luke Smith, a nephew of Danny Smith, as seemed like maybe the Sullivan role as a quality control guy offensively, maybe a yak guy, which is a hat that Sullivan wore last year. So, I could see the value of going from Grady Brown to Alexander. I like Grady Brown a lot, but I do kind of get bringing back and pivoting to Alexander. I thought going from Curry to McCurley was a downgrade. I mean, overall, it's the same because your major players are all the same.
Yeah, I view it. My initial thought when reading this question was it's the same. We got to have reason to think one way or the other based on play and results.
Do you think was it Terrell Austin? I think his contract is up after this year. What do you think his status is going forward?
I think there's a lot of people playing or coaching for jobs after this year.
I mean, usually it's only whenever their contracts expire, though. Pat Meyer, I believe, I have to go back and try to calculate. We don't know for sure, but we can, generally coordinators sign 3-year extensions or contracts, and positional coaches sign 2, so we can kind of tease together and reverse engineer
If
likely
that
contract
defense is not
statuses.
top 10, somebody's got to pay the price for it.
Well, it'll probably be Terrell Austin, then I would assume.
Yeah,
Even though Mike Tomlin runs this defense.
Let's take one more here. I think from Brad Bonar. Hello, Dave and Alex from Wheeling. Thanks for the good listens. Future speculations, off-topic rants, tinfoil hat moments. Boy, we got a lot of those. Referencing to having better depth and plenty position battles. Should the Steelers substitute players more often to keep them fresh for the third and fourth quarter and later in the season, especially with TJ, Cam, DBs, and running back depth? Less tired, less chance of injury, and better look at future potential starters. Look, ideally, I think you'd like to be in a position. I think, and this kind of plays into us talking about the fast starts and all like that as well too. I think if this team just all the way around on both sides of the football can start faster. Overall, especially obviously on the offensive side of football, but defense as well. I mean, what's the bugaboo been kind of the last couple of seasons with this defense? Kind of bends early on and then kind of starts getting it together as the game goes along, right? What if this team came out and started 3 and outs or 4 and outs, right out off the get go here? And look, ideally with the depth and all like that, would you like to see Cam and TJ come off the field a little bit more? You're going to see it probably, other than the running back rotation with Jalen Warren and Caleb, and we talked about Gainwell and all. I don't think I think that's just something that's built in kind of anyway because of having a new draft pick and more scheme and personnel related than anything there. So and defensive backs, you're going to be kind of limited to sub packages and stuff like that. So him listing defensive back and running back depth, I pay kind of less attention to when it comes to the substitution of players. I think the big question here is having better depth going to be able to put you in a position to rotating TJ and Cam out a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question, but it's hard to really quantify and compare it to other teams, compare it to Pittsburgh in past years. I mean, one thing a lot of teams have are designated kind of third down pass rushers, and Pittsburgh doesn't, in part because, you pay TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith all this money, and then they're so good, you want them to be out there on the field as much as possible, and you certainly don't want to replace them with a pure pass rusher on third down on those money downs. So I don't know. I mean, my first thought is I really don't have an issue with it. Cam Hayward's snap count finally was reduced last year. It's something they've been talking about for a long time and finally did for the first time last season. When I look at this defense and the issues, I don't know if I see that as the issue or even for the entire team.
Look, offense and defense need to have faster starts, period. Regardless of Mike Tomlin says this is a four-quarter. What was the quote that he used? I care less. I
Yeah,
forget.
some were not defined by the first quarter, whatever it was. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
something we
language does need to
strongly
stop.
right. Something that we strongly disagreed with.
Mhm.
I think he said last year. Look, if this team could just start faster on both sides of the football moving forward, it really could change the complexion of some of how these games go.
Or at least the offense. I mean, you would like
Right.
a faster start from the defense, but the offense has been the real sore spot for several seasons.
All right. Good question there, Brad. Good one to end on. We are coming up on night. We got 90 minutes out of this today, as we are primed to do here. So, with that, anything else coming across the wire here, Alex? I don't think there is.
Nope, not that I can tell. Hopefully, and I don't want to tease it too much, it'll happen at some point, but we have something a little different, something kind of fun, I think, for Steeler fans, Steelers Depot fans, hopefully for next week. So stay tuned for that little new segment, little new interactive-ish kind of, I don't know. I'm not teasing it well, but we got something coming for you guys. It'll be kind of fun, I think, starting next week.
All right, look forward to that. And let's see. Until Monday, as always, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button, upper right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. So, until Monday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.